Hi, 7th grade. Mrs. Close here. Today we are going to work with a leavening agent, namely yeast. If you did your homework, you know that leavening agents are products that create a chemical reaction in baked goods. Today we're making pizza dough. And yeast, when you purchase it, comes in a 3-pack that looks like this. What you want to make sure of is that the expiration date is well beyond today. So this is August 17th, 2021. And the reason for this is that yeast is a living microorganism. And I like to talk about it as treating it the way you would treat a houseplant. Okay, let's have a look at what yeast looks like. Take some scissors, cut off the end, and you're going to see what looks like granulated sand. Beige sand. Like houseplants like plant food, yeast likes food too, and we give it a tablespoon of sugar. Besides that, it likes a moist, warm environment. And the reason is because when yeast does its work, what it does is produce carbon dioxide gas, which is what makes baked products rise. So we will be adding 3/4 of a cup of warm, just slightly warm water to this mixture. This is called proofing the yeast. What that means is we are proving it's alive. And we will know it's alive because, well, we can already see. We have foam on the surface, which means that the yeast is getting gassy. And as that continues, it will get foamier to the point where it looks like the foam you see at the edge of the ocean. So we have proofed our yeast and we know that it's alive. Let's go to our second bowl, which we're going to measure our dry ingredients. Now I don't have whole wheat flour today, so I will be using all-purpose flour, and I need 2 1/4 cups. So here's 1, goes into my smaller bowl, 2. Now I just washed my hands before this demonstration so I can level with my fingers. And 1/4. We also need a teaspoon of salt. Now if I had had whole wheat flour, I would have used 1 1/4 cups of white or all-purpose flour and then 1 cup of whole wheat flour. So give this a stir and set it aside. Our job becomes to add the dry ingredients to the liquid ingredients. But first, we are going to add a tablespoon of olive oil to the yeast mixture. It will float on the top like an emulsion because oil floats on water. The oil simply gives the dough elasticity and some moisture. So we're ready to add the dry ingredients to the liquid ingredients. I like to use a wooden spoon, and I like to do this in 3 additions. First addition goes in very, very easily. By the way, always have your dough scraper at hand, or the edge of a spatula if you don't have a dough scraper, or what's called a pastry scraper. So when I stir this, I've added water to flour, etc. And flour has within it proteins. Those proteins, when they're stirred and moved around in a liquid environment, create something called gluten. And that's like an elastic mesh that gives your pizza dough its strength and elasticity. You know when you see in a pizza parlor that the pizza person can twirl the pizza dough up in the air and it holds together. That's what gluten is. Gluten is the strength that is developed in the dough. If you look at this dough, you can see that it's shaggy looking, and that's the beginning of the gluten development. I put in my 3rd addition, and it becomes harder and harder to stir. In other words, harder and harder for the liquid to absorb the dry. So at some point, I'm going to turn this out onto the countertop and work the dry into the liquid until I form a nice smooth ball of dough. Then I put that aside, even overnight, in a bag in the refrigerator, so that the yeast can continue to produce carbon dioxide and causes the dough to rise and even sometimes double in size. So it looks pretty messy, right? Pretty messy at this point. But with continued work, we will get this to hold together. I'm going to use your hands for this. And what you do is you expose the wet pieces of dough, move them around, and mop up the dry pieces of dough or the loose flour. If it's so sticky that you can't touch it without getting it all over your hands, you might want to add a little flour to your hands and to the mixture, just so that it becomes workable. This is becoming beautifully workable. I open it up so that the wet appears, and then I mop up the dry with the wet. And I keep doing this every once in a while, gathering it in with my pastry scraper, which will be the tool that I clean the counter with at the end because it gets it so free of flour. We're almost there and ready to do the procedure called kneading. Kneading. Kneading continues the development of the gluten and gives your dough strength. When you knead, you want to have your center of gravity, your upper body weight, over the dough, and you push through with the heel of your hand, pull back with your fingertips. And I like to do it from left to right, right to left, alternately, as if a boxer would be at boxing practice. So already you can see the difference in the consistency of this dough. And this will work for about 10 minutes. If you get tired, get your brother or your sister, your mom or your dad, your aunt, your uncle, or your grandparents to come give you a hand with this. You do have to use some muscle. You do have to work it to get that supreme gluten development for a nice pizza dough. I keep going, smooth, but I want it even smoother than that.